So does analytic idealism mean that there is no free will? No. Again, free will, it's a matter of what we identify with. If you identify with the ego, you have very little free will. However, if you identify with core subjectivity, with that which remains after you are completely amnesic in a perfect sensory deprivation chamber, if that's what you identify with,
That's a bit worrying for me, right? Because what this says to me is that he is living in his imagination, and his imaginations dictates his reality, his experience, right? He's so enveloped and wrapped up in his imaginative philosophy that which ends up being overpowering in a way, right? This idea of the big mind out there, and you're just a little, insignificant spy for the big boss, right? I mean, it feels, it sounds. I wouldn't say it feels, because I don't feel anything like that. But it sounds imposing to me. It sounds threatening. It sounds life destroying or passion destroying. It's like nothing matters, and therefore there cannot be any free will in the sense. Why would you need to have any free will if what happens is extracted from pure subjectivity somehow, right? And what can be objective about there was a few pop-ups there. I don't know exactly what it was. So now I'm rid of it. I'm trying to put myself in this frame of mind, right? And and I'm not like, okay, I don't like this kind of thinking because it makes me something, and therefore I don't like the philosophy. It's not that thing, because I already refuted his ideas here, right, or his presentation, in my opinion. I'm just trying to, okay, so where is it coming from? Where does it come from? I'm trying to second guess this, right? And I think it's based in psychology, mostly, right? His agenda is he needs to end up in a situation where all this shit that he doesn't like about being alive is sort of pushed to the side somehow, so he can focus on what is left, rather than saying, well, this is life, I've got to deal with it, right? I can't help think that, at least, right? So and this to get back on track, maybe this thinking about, okay, if you think of it this way, you will have free will. If you think of it that way, you won't have free will. Something like that, right? It's not your thinking that decides how things work in you, right? It's you are violating the idea of philosophy, because if there weren't anything going on in you, you wouldn't have any philosophy, right? Philosophy is a derivative of the actual aspect of having experiences. So you can't turn your philosophy around and point the other way and say, okay, if I think of it this way, I have free will, and if I think of it that way, I have free will, right? Free will, the idea of what is going on in your mind, comes before you are having the philosophy. It goes with the whole idea of philosophy. It is thinking about your thinking, and it's meta thinking, right? So if thinking is already there, going on, your meta thinking about that thinking cannot influence that thinking, because your meta thinking is a derivative or derived from the actual case you are having thinking. So, and that's why I like to have a structure in your metaphysics. Otherwise, it's just sort of cherry picky big bag of shit I can just pull from however I like. But if you look at the aspects and say there's a structure, you need to have this before you have this, you need to have a color before you have an elephant, and so on, right? And if you create that structure, it creates some limitations on what you can claim. And if there isn't any limitations on what you can claim, why do philosophy? Why don't you just cherry pick shit and say, I like this and I like that? And that's where I'm getting pissed off about a lot of these philosophers, because they're actually doing this cherry picking thing, but they are calling it philosophy, right? They're cherry picking shit to fit their agenda, but they cloak themselves in PhDs and whatever shit and say, yeah, I am a so-called philosopher, right?
Then by definition, you have absolute free will, because core subjectivity.
Okay, so now it's all of this black and white fallacy, right? Either it's not the case or it's complete. Otherwise, everything is free will. Obviously, it isn't, right? I can't just jump to the moon, right? I mean, I could try. I can't know until it happens, but until it happens, I won't know, right? So, but I'm guessing, I don't see many people seemingly trying to jump to the moon. So it's beyond their will to will that situation. If I can imagine myself on the moon, right? It doesn't mean I will have to go to the moon in order to prove free will or something like that, right? That's stupid, and that's another trick I sense when people try to refute free will. If you're not free to do whatever you like, you don't have free will. No, but you have limited influence of your world, right? Depending compared to what you could possibly imagine to do, right? And it's like something like, okay, if you're describing a human being, it has 2 arms, 2 legs, it has a stomach, a belly button, 2 ears, and so on. And then you say, and it's 100 feet tall. And then you go around looking at all these objects and say, none of them are 100 feet tall, so I guess human beings don't exist. No, you just exaggerated the criteria, right? And then you ruled out the possibility of human beings existing, right? And this sort of the same kind of approach to refuting free will, in my opinion. If I wasn't sitting in my car adjusting the steering wheel, that car wouldn't fucking get from that A to that B. I consider that fucking impossible. You might have an axiom that says it's very possible, but I would say you're fucking crazy, right? And there has to be something going on where I compare my visuals in that sense and translate it into an action that creates a situation in the next few seconds and so on in perpetuity, going from A to B, right? That's applying free will. You can't point to it. It doesn't have a color, it doesn't have a sound. You can't even say it's a sense. It's just an observation between your choices, your imaginations, and what's going on in that predicted future, right?
Is the lake where existence ripples. Everything is a ripple or a whirlpool in the lake of core subjectivity.
In the lake of... So I fucking hate this metaphor philosophy, right? I have the same kind of... it triggers me the same way as when people say, for instance, triggering is not maybe the right word, but let me clarify with an example, right? If let's say I've never seen an orange, right? Or, yeah, an orange. And somebody, I talk to somebody and say, well, then I saw an orange, or I ate an orange, something like that, right? I'd say, what's that? An orange? Well, it's like a reddish, yellowish ball. if you say that it's like a reddish yellowish ball, and I have already seen a ball, and I've already experienced the yellow and red to my perception, right? Then I would be able sort of to imagine something, but it wouldn't be an orange, right? It wouldn't be an orange. And it's the same problem here. He's describing something that nobody, by his own accord, has access to. But he's using these kinds of conceptualizations, these abstractions, right? In order to create a picture in your mind of that which is beyond his mind, right? It is fucking crazyville, right? It is, it's a free fall, right? Anybody can come up with whatever they want to be there, right? And I mean, it's like, why are you staying in these fucking cloud castles? When are you going to come back? It's like they're going up in this philosophy hot air balloon, right? And then they reach the limit of, it's tied to the ground, like their own zeppelins, right? And then it stops and it can't go any further. Then they say, well, I'm going to cut the wire. I'm going beyond my experiences, right? And then they sort of leave and take off and they sit up there and yell, hey! There's a different kind of sky up here. There are ripples up here, right? And maybe it's a bad analogy. But one thing the analogy tells me, they're never going to come back, right? It's like they have left reality because maybe that's the whole purpose of their freaky philosophy, right?
Subjectivity, that field of subjectivity that underlies all nature. If that
underlies all nature. Now, he has talked about that outside realm and called it all sorts of things like universe and world and reality and all sorts of shit, right? 5 or 6 different, at least, terms for the same thing. Now he says that there's something underlying it. So there's something outside his experiences he calls world or something like that, right? Or nature. And there's something underlying that nature. So he can say there's something I'm presenting to you calling, nature, which is outside your mind. And then there's something underlying that also, which is also so it's beyond your mind, or what? It's a sort of next level beyond my cloud castles, right? It's a cloud castles. Underlying. What is going on? It seems to me he's describing something that he hasn't argued for. There's something underlying. It's like there are superstrings or something like that. What are those fucking superstrings? How does he get to them? He's rejecting, materialism and matter and sort of. He doesn't talk about that, right? Apparently. I'm not sure, right? But now it's sort of something underlying. Isn't that the same thing? Matter underlies whatever, right? The idea of the what's it called? All the particles and that shit, right? That kind of model, right? What's it called? I forget the term. The standard model, I think it's called, right? How does this all? It seems like he started out with, I have some experiences, right? And now there's subjectivity that is underlying another realm that is also outside your experiences, and so it's so big and convoluted, and and when he goes there, it's like he can invent or refute whatever he likes because he can come up with whatever he wants, because I can't go there and check. I can't use my experiences because he has defined it as that which is beyond experiences, right? So he can roam around in that imaginary realm and come up with what he likes. And I'm feeling I'm going in circles here, or repeating myself rather, right? Let's go on.
That's what you identify yourself with. Then all of your choices.
Identify yourself with, okay, so that's what, sort of the core of why I went on this rant here, right? But I'm not into identifying myself with something. I'm not, philosophy is not about identifying. It's not creating something that, or, a dichotomy or something like that and say, I'm going to identify with that. I won't identify with that, but I will, that's psychology rather than philosophy. Your philosophy from the starting point tries to encompass everything. So there's nothing you identify with because you're trying to describe everything. And that everything you're describing is that which you have access to, right? As I point out, or my way of approaching it is that I am treating my experience as a representation of something outside. But that doesn't mean that I can then go and talk about what the outside is. I can just say it's a representation of it, and it's an axiomatic stance, right? Because I can argue my way to it from that starting point of my experiences, right? There's nothing about my experiences that says there must be an outside. And he, of all people, should understand that because he just refuted materialism, which is claiming that your experiences are an outside, right? And he says, no, it can only be an inside. And when you say it can only be an inside, where the hell did you get that outside from? Because it was habitual thinking. It was not argued. That's why you retracted from it. And then the next question, as I pointed out earlier, is, well, why do I think there is an outside? What is it? What is it? What am I basing that on? Well, when you remove all your habitual thinking, all you're having is colors, sounds, tastes, and five senses, right? There might be something like hunger and so on. We will forget that because that's, limited to your body or maybe something like that, right? And you could add them, but they're not necessary for this kind of thinking here, right? Then what is it about a particular sound or the completeness of the sound, the taste, and so on, that makes you think there's something beyond it? There isn't, just like Descartes pointed out. It might just, for all I know, be some kind of evil demon screwing around with my experiences, right? Just creating shit and I'm just believing whatever or attaching meaning to it as I see fit, right? But what I can do is, as Descartes pointed out, I am because I think, or I philosophize, or I think about my experience. I can think my way to saying, well, I am deciding to treat it as such. Nobody can take that away from me. I'm not deciding for you or those people over there. I'm deciding freaking for myself to do that. And if my way of thinking is appealing to you, and you adapt the same kind of thinking, brilliant. Then we might be able to do something together, right? So it's this kind of high-flying cloud castle imaginations and sitting up on high talking to the little people down there. You should just accept my message. I am the Jesus of philosophy, right?
Whatever they might be, as a matter of fact, all choices made by any living being to ever have lived or who will ever live are your...
Okay, so these broad sweeping claims, right? About, all 4 billion years of living life in the solar system, or potentially out of the solar system for 10 billion years, whatever, who knows, right? And in 100 billion years of the future is going to be like this. Yes, I had some colors and sounds and so on, but there's a world outside that I'm going to tell you about, 112 billion years of how things are going to be, right? And at the same time, he tells me I'm a stupid monkey, right? On an insignificant rock in an insignificant solar system, right? In an insignificant galaxy, whatever, right? From one point, yeah, you're stupid, but I can tell you from the Big Bang to the elder of the universe what is going to go on in all minds, and this is fuck off, man.
Your free-willed choices, because they are determined by core subjectivity. Why? Because there is nothing other than
it's determined. So it's because he has invented this idea of pure subjectivity. Then that pure subjectivity is going to be everything, right? What else pops up on that, from that, is just stupid perception. It's just so you have a little idea of how to navigate through this big subjectivity, but it's the subjectivity that is underlying everything, that is sort of the master of the universe. And it's sort of, he talks about it, but he can't tell you what it is really, right? It's an idea of something that only if you are fucking crazy and all your senses don't work, something like that, close to it, right? That you will be able to have an idea of it, right? So he creates these, he can tell you everything about the whole history of the universe and what is going to happen, or, something like that, right? As he just did. At the same time as what he bases that judgment on is a woman in Germany and imagining what it would be like if you were completely crazy, amnesic, and can't remember anything, and you are deprived of your senses, right? So that's his starting point for this, and then it's going to tell you everything, right? Everything is explained, right? Science tells you what the universe does, but I'm going to tell you what it is, right?
core subjectivity. There is nothing other than the lake of universal consciousness. Everything is determined by the patterns of behavior of that lake, by the intrinsic properties of that lake, the archetypes of universal consciousness, if you want to.
The archetype of universal consciousness? So it's now it's consciousness. Before it was subjectivity. And then he's screwing around with these terms, right? I don't like that. I like it to be very, very strict. Yes, you could say, okay, he's sitting here, he can't give me all definitions and all this and all that. But why is he not taking it sort of one step at a time, rather than giving me this half-ass explanation that I might fall for? But because he's not presenting any definitions and he's screwing around with the terms, I might be tricked into accepting this as good philosophy based on me thinking, well, I guess he knows what he's talking about because PhD, right? And written 10 books or whatever, right? I can't deconstruct his books, right? I could do it to myself. But I would like to do it as I do here, because I like this kind of doing it. How should I say it? Do it verbally. Do it real time, so to say, right? I don't like this. I basically don't like reading philosophy. There's so much crap philosophy. It's unbelievable, right? There's so much academic, polemic bullshit philosophy that is, I don't know, I don't know what words to put on it, right? It's like, it is sort of, it's almost like an insult to the idea of philosophy, in my opinion, right? And it only makes it less likely that people in generality is going to start listening to philosophy. And that might actually be the main purpose of this. It is sort of a linguistic gatekeeping of the little people having the idea, creating the idea that they're so smart, I don't understand what they're saying, right? While they're basically not saying anything because it's so shrouded in lingo that you can't really decipher it, right? What comes to mind is that article on Essentia Foundation where they talked about finding the ought in Hume's is-ought gap, right? seeking the odd or something. I'm paraphrasing, and I've deconstructed it early on my channel here. There's so crappy. I mean, it's so ridiculously badly written and argued and so on, and it lacks all sorts of fundamental shit in order to even understand what they're doing, right? The person that wrote that article is so ignorant of both what Hume is talking about and what it takes to do good philosophy and so on. The list is almost endless. How badly I mean, you could say it's written well. It's well written from a linguistic Licks number kind of level, but the intrinsic understanding of philosophy is so ignorant. It tells me a lot about what the status is of philosophers and academic philosophy at this point. They're living in sort of a fantasy land. I don't know what the hell it is, right? And it has to be, yes, I am a professor in panpsychism, yes, and we have been discussing this for 20 years, and we have written an article there, an article there, but we are trying our best to the combination problem. Somebody will fuck off, right? Okay. Life is what happens while you're busy doing something else, right? They're busying themselves doing shit that nobody wants, so they can get their fucking blood money from the state, right? While people out in reality is, dealing with everyday life. So why is this crazy shit being pushed so hard? While people can't use it for anything other than sitting in creating their own little cloud castle where they can adopt this shit, right? I mean, this is not going to bring petrol to my car, right? This is not going to bring food in my refrigerator, right? This is not going to figure out whether or not taxation is extortion, right? This is not going to explain what communism is, for instance, right? Or it doesn't really deal with anything that I care about. But it's pure subjectivity since the Big Bang, and it doesn't have free will, unless if you want that to be free will and you associate it with it, you could say it's perfect, everything is free will. It's sort of, oh, man.
To talk Jungian language. So if you do identify with core subjectivity, free will is absolutely inescapable. Every single choice you make, or anybody else makes, or anything in nature makes, is a free-willed choice in the sense that it is determined by that which you identify with, which is core subjectivity, which is the only thing that exists.
I identify with? I really, it really triggers me this. You identify with? My philosophy is not a fucking choice. There's nothing to choose. I don't create a double philosophy. And then I say, okay, now there's one philosophy there and another philosophy. I think I'm going with that one. That's not how it works. And if you think it works that way, there's something wrong with your thinking. Right? There's something wrong. There's not a multiple choice thing all of a sudden, right? That's not how it works to do philosophy. That is your philosophy. You won't end up in a fork road or something like that, right? There's no multiple choices in philosophy.
It's the lake that ripples. Everything else are doings of core subjectivity.
So it's a lake, right? That's a concept. You're referring to something that I can go and experience, a lake, I suppose. I've seen lakes before. I lived close to lakes when I was a child. I spent a lot of time on lakes. I know what a lake looks like. So you're appealing to something that I can actually experience or expect to experience, right? While you are claiming it as a substitute, a metaphor for that which I do not have access to, right? So you are tricking me. You're tricking me to imagine a lake with some ripples on it, and therefore you are implanting a picture of what might go on out there, right? While you are at the same time saying you can't say anything about it, right? That's basically what you say when you say, I only have my perceptions. That's the trick. That's how he tricks you, right? Because if I tell you, as I pointed out before, if I say, you shouldn't think of a polar bear. Well, you can't help thinking about that polar bear because that's what I'm told you not to think about, right? But because polar bear triggers that cognitive apparatus in order to think about what you shouldn't think about. I tricked you into actually thinking about that which I just told you not to think about, right? So what he does is he's creating a picture of something that you could actually experience, and then he sort of metaphorically implants that as a picture of something beyond your... So you have this mental picture, but that's just based on abstractions from what? From your perceptions, right? So he's tricking you. He's tricking you. It's just willful thinking, or wishful thinking. He just wants to be able to, I've explained it. It's pure subjectivity. Bullshit, man.
Ripples on the lake, whirlpools on the lake, the pluckings of the guitar string. So in that sense, analytic idealism will tell you that there is no difference between free will and determinism at a cosmic level. Because at the level of core subjectivity or universal...
So now he's called it cosmic. Cosmic. How many terms has he been using, right? And are they terms for the same, or are they differences, right? I mean, universe, reality, subjectivity, cosmic, cosmos, I mean, reality, I mean, it's like he keeps using new words in every episode. Ah, man. That's a sign of, in my opinion, somebody who doesn't care about rigidity, right? He doesn't care about rigidity. He loves metaphors, right? He wants you to, when you think about this, he's saying, it's basically everything is metaphors, or some kind of very simplistic abstraction, like a vibration, right? That's so abstract in its idea that you can place it anywhere you want and nobody can refute it, right? If you're saying, well, it's all made of little beavers, right? This starts to sound weird, right? It's made of little beavers, all the underlying beavers, right? But a beaver is as good a metaphor as any other. But it starts to sound weird then, right? But he say if it's a ripple, it's sort of a very abstraction. Then you can get away with it, right? Then you can implant that in your mind, so you have this picture of something beyond your experiences that are just sort of a flat landscape with little ripples and that makes sort of kind of sense that ripple could end up becoming a color on your perceptive apparatus, whatever, right? But he's just screwing around. He's just inventing shit. He can't get to it. So he can only try to implant it by saying it's something so abstract that you can't possibly refute it, you could say, right? But I don't like to be in a situation where I can't argue either for or against. Then I'm beyond philosophy, in my opinion. Then we are into mysticism, right? When you go beyond what you can philosophize about, then you are into mysticism, in my opinion, right? And this smells of mysticism. There's been countless numbers of people who have, when they run into problems with their philosophy, they step into mysticism in order to create something that they need in order to get to the next step. Because it all has to be, it has to be argued that this and this follows from this, right? Rather than saying, I can argue for this. It's impossible for me to argue, but I can decide that I'm working from this, right? I can decide for myself that I can work with it, right? He's sitting there implying that it can be reasoned towards, right? He can reason his way from this little insignificant monkey perception he has. He can reason his way to the whole understanding of all the history of the universe, whatever it is, right? I don't buy any of it. I would say that whatever you say or whatever anybody claims, even if I do it, reject it, right? They claim goes on before whatever becomes the perception. I don't buy it. And I don't care about it because I can't go there, right? It's impossible. You can come up with whatever shit you want. At the end, what you have is your perception, right? It's like that, that IKEA table I talked about, and the manual that you have is, let's say, the philosophy in order to assemble this chair, right, or this table, and you assemble the table, and then Bernardo Kastrup comes and says, no, I have a different manual, and it describes what goes on before it becomes the manual. Yes, but there's something that goes on before it becomes a manual. Okay, but is it the same manual? Yes, it's the same manual. I think I presented this, analogy earlier in a different way. It's better to present it this way and saying, well, yeah, it's the same manual. But I have an idea of what goes on before it becomes the same manual. Okay, good for you, mate. But it doesn't change how I assemble the table, right? No, it's the same manual. I just have some fancy idea of how it becomes the manual that might be different from your ideas of how it becomes a manual. And it explains the whole history of the universe and so on and so on and so on and so on, right? I'm like, okay, Mr. Crazy Boy, right? Let me just, assemble my, table, right? Fuck off with your ideas what goes on before the table. It doesn't help me assemble the table, right? If you have some ideas to how to improve the manual and how to make it more safe, the table, or more functional, or, whatever, I'm willing to listen. I'm open for improvement of the manual. But I don't give a fuck about how you think the manual becomes the manual if it's the same fucking manual, right?
Consciousness. The desire is the need. The need is the desire. The need to do something is the same thing as the desire to do it. There's no distinction between the two because there is no external world.
And need and desire, is that not the same? Are you just screwing around with the terms, right? I would like these philosophers to be more grab their own tits and say, this is how I approach it. They always present it as if they have come up with the perfect thinking for everybody, right? I have seen the light. I am the Jesus of philosophy. This is how you do it, right? Just be a little humble about it. Say, this is how I approach it, right? I approach it this way, and I decided to do it that way, and I like it this way, I like it that. It's more like, okay, fair enough. You have your own philosophy. Can you give me maybe an example of how you apply it in your everyday and so on, right? No, it's about sitting in the chairs and coming up with all sorts of cloud castles beyond your experiences and then telling you this is what is going on out there, right?
That imposes choices on the agency that makes choices. Free will is a red herring. It's a philosophical red herring.
Something that misleads or detracts from the relevant question. So it's like, no, don't talk about free will. You are diverting from the really important question here, right? I guess that's the big subjectivity out there. The big subjectivity who has allowed you to exist in your dissociation, to spy around in the subjectivity, and then they will suck you dry after they kill you after 75 years.
It arises from certain misconceptions. And it's fundamentally grounded on self-identification, which is a subjective thing. Different people identify differently. Some people don't identify with their limbs. limbs, the legs and arms, to the point that they feel a compulsion to cut off a leg.
No, but so what? Okay, but I'm going to associate them with their legs, right? There's also this, yes, but you can't tell me how I should associate, right? At the same time as it is a little convoluted. You have to take your own stance. You can't let anybody else tell you how you should understand things. That goes against the whole idea of you philosophizing. You philosophize from the inside of your experiences. Then you can't stop and let your experiences tell you how to understand the experiences. So if somebody says, I don't identify with my legs, okay, crazy boy, but I'm going to associate you with your legs, right? I don't care what you say. Fuck off with you, right? I'm going that way, right? Go away, crazy boy or crazy girl. So it's like, don't let your experience tell you what to think. That is your responsibility. And that's possibly, maybe that is the biggest problem in philosophy, that it's usually all the crazy people who are going to go out there and tell you how fantastic their philosophy is, right? And this is how I do it, and everybody should do it this way. I have seen the light, right? It's always the crazy people who are explicit and, crazy enough to think that they can change everything, right? While those who are sufficiently skeptic and doubtful and I'm not sure about this and that, they're more likely to, shut up, don't be outspoken about it, right? And all people here are these crazy people then, right? I would like to be in that sort of a kind of, how would I put this? I'm a very skeptical person. I'm a fucking extremely skeptic, right? But that doesn't mean I can't get to a philosophy. But I'm skeptical about my experiences telling me how I should understand my experiences, right? And the training that almost all human beings, I suppose, have been given is you should just listen to your experiences and let them tell you what you should do, right? You should listen to your parents, you should listen to your teachers, you should listen to your priest, you should listen to whatever to tell you how to think. But if you start to think about this, then what you are actually saying in that case is that individual you are experiencing, you are allowing to think for themselves. At least somebody must have thought something to themselves. And they have been upgraded to a level where they can tell you that you shouldn't think for yourself, but accept what they have been thinking for themselves. There's a problem there, right? Because if that person can think for itself, then you can think for yourself, right? Maybe it's more pernicious. Well, what's the term? People want you to put down your guards. They want to stop you from thinking for yourself, so they can control you, right? That most philosophy or any other kind of morality or all this shit have 99.9% of the cases been some kind of control mechanism, right? Rather than I am thinking for myself. You might be inspired by me, but I'm thinking for myself, right? It has been control mechanisms rather than teaching people to think for themselves. Because it seems to me that these stupid monkeys Bernardo is talking about have very high thoughts about their own philosophy, being so immaculate that it can just be, I have a message for you. I have come up with some thinking. You have to adopt that thinking because I'm special. I've talked to the big mind, sort of, right? All these crazy people, man.
Or an arm, because they don't identify with it. Other people, mystics in particular, identify with the whole of existence. They are supremely free, because by identifying with core subjectivity, every choice is determined by that which they do identify with. And at the same time, and without contradiction, every choice is determined. It is determined by what core subjectivity is. Core subjectivity chooses to act the way it does.
Oh, yeah, there it was, right? Taking away his responsibility. He is just riding the train of the big mind. He can help himself. It's just being done through me. I have no control. I am just, I'm a spokesperson for the big mind sort of thing. That's why it's a very, 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 very bad idea to have taxation. Because all these fucking crazy people, I am being forced to pay for their shit, right? And that might not necessarily be Bernardo Kastrup, but there are thousands upon thousands crazy people like him, right? That are normal people working their night shift or whatever, right? Trying to make ends meet. Are forced to being paid for so they can have their ears filled with shit like this, right?
Because it is what it is. To choose differently would imply that it is something that it is not, which is a contradiction. Whatever it chooses to do, it's per necessity and also per will, because it chooses.
But what about pizzas, right? What about pizza? If I ask my children, what do they care most about? Pizzas, or that there might be some weirdo ripples beyond your experience? What would I actually like to talk with them about and share with them and figure out how to approach, right? If I see a pizza, can I just eat it, right? What would I care most about in my everyday, right? Your fucking crazy cloud castles, or how to approach a pizza, right? Just to get back to Earth, right? You sort of space alien, right? Get down to fucking everyday, right? No. Let me sit in my cloud castles, right? Oh, I want to get away from reality and join my big master. In 10 years, he's going to suck every good stuff out of me, right?
Chooses to do it out of itself. The choice is determined by what it identifies itself with, which is all there is. So I've been going back and forth between free will and determinism to try to convey the understanding to you that this is a red herring, that necessity and will at the ultimate level, which is the only level that really counts, where existence really is.
Yes, this is a case where he's starting off in a situation with perception, where there's no description of free will or anything like that. It's just that, okay, I'm jumping from this perception into fancy ideas of what might be out there. And then when he has created that, he sort of say, okay, now I'm going to change my understanding of what is going on in my perception, right? But it's a begging the question. It's a fallacy. It's basically one big fucking fallacy he's presenting to you, right? Whatever he can come up with all sorts of terms and shit, like, it doesn't matter what words he uses. This is based on a fucking fallacy. It's one big circular argument about shit that he cannot possibly say anything about, in my opinion, right? And it's completely useless, because whatever it does is ending up with the same manual that I'm going to assemble that IKEA table with, right? And if he says that he's starting out from this manual And then he's creating a cloud castle and say, now it's a different manual. But then he used the original manual in order to figure out that should be a different manual. How does that fucking work without being a circular argument, man?
It's what it is. Necessity and will are one and the same thing. And that's why Schopenhauer called nature the will.
Okay, I think we'll stop there. The next part will be something called... Hang on. It will be... Oh, it will be summary. Okay, apparently it needs to be summarized. A summary that has to be summarized and closing. 3 minutes. Okay. So I guess all in all, maybe do I have time for this? I think I can fit this in. Let's try. We will make it easy, right?
So in summary,
is that music or is it just qualia? So if it's not music, why is it there? If you call that music, do you find that attractive music? I guess it's sort of subjective, it depends on what you like. But it sounds like electronic music to me, right? I just bought the old Kraftwerk album the other day called Radioactivity, Radioactivity in English. And it's sort of, it's an incredible concept album that mixes the idea of radioactivity and activity on a radio, right? And combines the two concepts into a general idea, which is sort of, it's a mind-blowing concept, right? Really mind-blowing, in my opinion, in the sense of being sort of, that's clever. It's a clever idea, right? It might be maybe not the best Kraftwerk album, but I really liked it. And I remember it was the first time I heard in the radio back in the day in the 70s, I heard this track called Radioactivity, and I was sort of, wow, that is different, right? I have never heard anything like it, right? That was, and I actually think that it was the only Kraftwerk track that was popular to the best of my understanding back then. Later I also heard Autobahn, which actually came before, but that's a different story. Because they became popular and then they started to look back in the catalog, right? But that's good electronic music, right? What is this? Why do you need to have it there, right? Why? You fucking hate qualia, man, right? Why are you using qualia in a dissertation about what's beyond qualia? Because you need qualia. You need your voice, you need your presence, you need the visuals, you need things like that in order to present which is beyond these qualia, right? Okay.
The worldview I've tried to share with you today means that...
Again, point out a worldview. It sounds like a choice. It sounds like this is what I would like to be the case, right? I can't help think that. It's a worldview. There are other people who see the world differently, right? I would like him to call it my philosophy. This is my philosophy. A worldview? This is just sort of some lowest common denominator kind of thinking, right? Stand up and say, this is my philosophy. And let me scrutinize it, right? I might actually be very inspired by it. It's not the case in this case, but, rather than talk about worldviews, it almost starts to sound like politics, right?
That we accept that there is an objective world out there, a world beyond our individual mind.
A world beyond our individual mind, except I'm not accepting anything. Fuck off you, man, right? Don't tell me what I should accept. So your worldview is that I accept something? Fuck off, man.
Minds, but that world in and of itself is also mental. It is also a mind. whose mental activity presents itself on our dashboard that we call the screen of perception.
There's no our dashboard. There's your dashboard, right? Is your dashboard our dashboard or what? Or are you saying my dashboard and your dashboard and your dashboard and your dashboard? You're just saying because I have a dashboard, you have the same kind of dashboard just from a different angle or whatever, right? This we think, this collective thinking, right? Speak for yourself, man. You're talking to your experiences, basically, right? You're taking all sorts of shit for granted in this philosophy without clarifying that's actually what you're doing.
As the colloquially called physical world, the material world colloquially meant. And if that is the case, then as we go through life, we are surrounded by meaning because the representations on our dashboard that we call physical objects, physical entities and events, they are symbols in the sense that...
How do you know? You just came up there, symbols? What do you mean a symbol? If I experience this pillow, is that a symbol or is it the color that is a symbol? This is just too fluffy, this, right? You want to say there's something going on outside that is infinitely more important than your little ridiculous perception, right? These are symbols of a greater meaning that, okay, you don't have access to, but I have because I have 15 PhDs, right? And I've been with the Hadron Collider. So I know, I can tell you, right? It's a worldview. Accept it, right? Adapt it, my message.
They point to something beyond themselves. The physical world is not its own meaning. It's a collection of symbols that represent and point to the mental activity that gives it its existence. The thing in itself is a mentation represented as physicality, and therefore physicality is a book to be read. It's a book to be interpreted, and we are literally surrounded by semantic meaning as we go through life. If this understanding appeals to you not only intellectually, but sinks into your whole cognition and informs your emotions, I hope...
So it's about accepting an idea and then let it sink into your everyday to be it's sort of a kind of mind control, right? This is an appeal to mind control. I have a message. Yeah, it may make you feel good. I'm also saying God now and then, right? So all these crazy God people, they will like it because they like when you say God, right? And just let it sip through you and you become one with the mind, right? Fuck off, man. I need to get a pizza and I need to get some petrol on my car, right?
Hope that will help make your life richer. I also hope that what we've discussed today will allow you to give yourself intellectual permission to explore certain possibilities and hypotheses about reality that our mainstream worldview, materialism, considers a priori impossible, which is a reflection of cultural prejudice. So if you can give yourself intellectual permission to look beyond the narrow window of cultural prejudices, I trust that that can enrich your life significantly and the lives of the people you love and the people around you. Ultimately, that is my hope for this course. If you want to look further into analytic idealism, I am the director of a foundation called the Essentia Foundation, and we make it our mission to produce material about analytic idealism from a analytic and empirical perspective.
Okay, and that's a contradiction. That's a violation of philosophy. Idealism is metaphysics by any standard I could possibly use, right? Now, empiricism is a channel to knowledge, right? It's a limitation of what you can call knowledge, right? Now, in order to get to the understanding of knowledge, as I pointed out so many times now, right? You need to have settled your metaphysics, right? And first, when you have done that, you can do some epistemology in order to get to a clarification or whatever term you want to use, definition maybe, right? Of what you mean by knowledge, which is then, as he says, it is narrowed down to what you can get empirically, right? You can't use that to clarify your metaphysics, because you need your metaphysics in order to get to a knowledge, to get to empiricism. So it's fucked up from the ground floor, right? When you look at other people's philosophy, look for shit like this, right? Because it basically blows everything out of the water. It in my opinion, this kind of circular structure in the thinking invalidates all the thinking, right? It invalidates it, right? It's like saying that you can build the roof of a house before you build the foundation and the walls. Yes, I built the roof, now I'm going to make the foundation. It doesn't work. You can't do it that way, right? And you can't say, okay, now I built first I built the roof, and now I'm going to use the roof in order to figure out how to build the foundation. Something like that is saying, in order to get to this sort of analogy, right? It's an analogy. It doesn't work. And furthermore, what he is presented here is so fucking badly argued, right? Where he brings in shit left and right. As he sees, he jumps out of his perception by calling it a dashboard and showing you some needles and shit, right? In order to inflict some understanding without actually stating it axiomatically that that's what he does. So he is sophistically screwing around with your mind in order to convince you that his philosophy is more comforting, right? And he's rejecting that, simple-minded materialism, right? I don't trust this guy, right? To me, he's fucking crazy, right? He is crazy on a high academic level, right? But those are usually the most dangerous ones because they sound like they know what they're talking about, right?
There are many people and many institutions out there that make cases for idealism based on introspection, like meditation, spirituality, religion. I and Essential Foundation have absolutely nothing against those. On the contrary, we just felt that there is also a logical, empirical case to be made.
So he wants to make sure all these crazy people want to go there. It's sort of, there's room for somebody. As long as you say idealism, you're welcome, no matter how crazy your method of thinking is, right?
For analytic idealism that does not depend on first-person spiritual insight. And that's what we dedicate ourselves to trying to get across. So if you want to look further, you can have a look at Essential Foundation. Beyond that, thanks for watching. I appreciate your time, your attention, and maybe you'll see you next time.
Well, thank you very much for sharing this, and I've listened very carefully, and I also deconstructed it in 15 or 16 parts here, and I hope you enjoyed it. It has been an interesting return to analytic idealism and trying to figure out what the hell is going on with these people, or particular maybe Bernardo Kastrup is sort of the galleon figure, right, for this foundation, right? I can't help thinking that if you need to make a movement or a foundation, it's because you want to rally less philosophical people around you to cushion your half-ass philosophy, because you don't feel that you can stand on your own 2 feet and just hold up your philosophy. You need to wrap it in all sorts of other people to make it feel like it's growing and you're, something like that, right? I'm fine with stating I'm resting in my own philosophy. I like my philosophy. I am so strong in my own philosophy that I'm willing to say, this is my philosophy. I don't need a foundation. I don't need a movement. I don't need disciples, right? Because it always ends up being authoritarian. Do as you're told. There is a cult figure, right? It always ends up being a fucking cult. Because those who are not right thinking, they have to be pushed out, right? Just like he attacked me for doing my last deconstruction of Analytic Idealism. He basically told me he will send the guns of the state in my direction if I kept doing it, right? So it says everything you need to know. It's the same old fucking old wine on new bottles, right? It's another one of these cults of this, that, and the other, right? And we always have to go and ask Bernardo. And Bernardo is, yes, we have a book group of people who are reading the books and discussing. And every other month we will have an audience of Bernardo coming in and we can ask questions. And, oh my God, Bernardo, oh, right? Same old, right? You have to stand your own ground. You have to work from your own philosophy. I don't need a foundation. I don't need a group of people telling me how to understand my own experiences, because I am violating my own philosophy by saying my experiences can tell me how to understand my experiences. Okay, I think I've done enough with this. I think we have, I think I have told you enough about what I think through this. And there has been more like, it's sort of like 14 or 15 hours of deconstruction, right? So I hope you have enjoyed it. Please consider a donation. I would appreciate that. Links in the description, or, other methods of donation through the board, also linked below. And please consider sharing, liking, and subscribing, and all that good stuff, helping me get the voice out. And not that I want to create, as I say, a movement or anything like that. I just want people to, I keep saying, think for yourself, right? And I want to get the message out that people should think for themselves. And I hope that my deconstruction comes across as somebody trying to think for himself, right? It's not like I'm going to tell you how to think. I'm telling you that you should think for yourself. I'm not going to give you any, and let me say it this way maybe, I'm not going to give you any conclusions. I'm maybe giving you some ideas of how to think between the conclusions. And when I deconstruct, I tend to point out when people connect philosophy between conclusions, they're actually not philosophizing. They're just jumping from one conclusion to the other as they want to do, not because they argue well for it. So that's the whole point. How do you go about doing philosophy? You need to have a sort of meta philosophy, you could say, right? Or an understanding of the structure of the thinking that is philosophy, doing philosophy, which is sort of the thinking between conclusions. And if somebody claims to be a philosophy, hands you conclusions and say, this is my message, this is what you should do, you can adhere to this thinking, they're basically just wanting you to follow them down their crazy path, right? And they're not sufficiently self-critical so that they say, well, this is my philosophy. Please, this is my philosophy. If you have criticism, please give it to me, right? Criticize my philosophy. Don't necessarily criticize my conclusions, because they are a result of the philosophy. So we need to get to the philosophy, right? So I like to tell people to think for themselves, because I would like to be in a world where I have a very strong sense that everybody's thinking for themselves. And if they can think for themselves, it's more likely that I'm going to be compatible with them, rather than if they have been fucking mind controlled by crazy people like Bernardo Kastrup, right? So, that's it. See you in the next one.